This is the news on Rainier Avenue Radio.
The Seattle Metropolitan Chamber of Commerce has filed a lawsuit seeking to block the city's quote-unquote jumpstart tax as unlawful. Per Patch.com, the tax is tailored for the highest salaries at Seattle's largest companies and estimated to raise $214 million annually. Unlike the 2018 head tax, which was unanimously approved and then overturned after immense pressure, the jumpstart tax is more specifically targeted. The payroll tax ranges from 0.7% to 2.4% and applies only to salaries for employees making more than $150,000 a year. The highest end of the tax applies only to companies with $1 billion or more in payroll and only on employee earnings of $400,000 or more. The suit claims the law was rushed and oversteps the city's authorities by unlawfully taxing, quote, the right to earn a living. Despite not applying to small businesses, the chamber argues that the tax will have wide ramifications and slow the post-pandemic economic recovery.
And that's your news on Rainier Avenue Radio.
The Urban League of Metropolitan Seattle, empowering communities and changing lives. The Urban League has been there to serve when our community is at its lowest. It's never mattered what the crisis was. The systemic oppression remains constant for those most vulnerable. Here at the Urban League of Metropolitan Seattle, we'll be temporarily adjusting our hours of operation and available services. If you are in need of resources, we recommend that you give us a call at 206-461-3792. To make an appointment, press 0 and speak with the receptionist. Walk-in hours will be from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. Monday through Friday. And hey, we'll gladly work with you via phone as best as we can if you're exhibiting any signs of illness to assist you with information to save your home, find you a place to sleep, or connect you to job opportunities. The Urban League of Metropolitan Seattle. That's 206-461-3792.
Welcome to the Fitness Corner. I'm your host, Mark Bryant, and you're going to get a whole total body workout on my show, starting off with a warm-up, aerobics, strength training, cool down, and stretching every Friday from 11:30 to 12 right here on Rainier Avenue Radio.
You know you can't get enough of Rainier Avenue Radio. .world.
Hello, you're listening to the news on Rainier Avenue Radio .world. I'm Kendra.
I'm Asher.
Today is Monday, December 14th. The news on Rainier Avenue Radio is live every Monday from 6 p.m. to 6:30 p.m., providing you with current, trustworthy, and useful news content focused on super service to the local South Seattle audience. We will not tell you what to think, but we will instead provide the basis for you to discern and decide for yourself. Tonight, we'll talk about clashes in Olympia, the newly discovered cyber spying campaign riddling federal agencies, Colombian coffee, and the Cleveland baseball team. Now, onto the local news. Despite record amounts of charitable donations this year, Patch.com says the effects of the coronavirus pandemic are suffocating nonprofits across the country. Organizations face soaring costs and demand for help, yet are largely without their own support systems, including volunteers and in-person fundraising events. December is typically the best month for charitable organizations. The Giving Tuesday Data Commons estimates there was a 23% jump in the number of people who participated in the movement to donate on the Tuesday after Thanksgiving in the United States. The holiday season that the charities big and small rely on is underway in full force amid a resurging pandemic that has infected more than 16 million people and claimed nearly 298,000 lives in the U.S. alone.
On Saturday afternoon, police in Olympia arrested one person following a shooting at a violent protest between two heavily armed groups near the Capitol building. Per Patch.com, the Thurston County Sheriff's Office confirmed the arrest but didn't immediately release details. The Olympia Police Department said the person who was shot was taken to the hospital by other civilians. That person's injuries are unknown. The two groups had opposing political views, and each side was heavily armed with rifles, handguns, and clubs and engaged in violent clashes. police arrested a person earlier in the day for a firearms violation. About 100 law enforcement officials with Olympia Police Department, Thurston County Sheriff's Office, and Washington State Patrol tried to keep the protest orderly. Police declared a riot early in the afternoon and told the crowd to disperse. Groups planning demonstrations in the city included a group that wanted COVID-19 restrictions lifted, another protesting President Donald Trump's loss in the presidential election last month, and a Black Lives Matter counter-protest.
Authorities in Washington state say that more than half of the inmates at Geiger Correction Center have tested positive for COVID-19 and are being kept in isolation and quarantined. Per Como News, 79 of the 138 inmates at the lockup in Airway Heights tested positive as of Friday. Department officials had confirmed 9 COVID-19 cases in inmates during the previous week. Officials also say 11 employees have tested positive.
Prosecutors have charged a Bremerton man with a hate crime for allegedly stalking a black man at work, nearly hitting him with a vehicle and challenging him to a fight and calling him a racial slur. Per Como News, Christopher Humphreys was working as a bartender at the Sirens Bar on December 4th when the black man arrived. He threw the man's ID at him, called him the N-word, and followed him out of the bar. Humphreys went to the man's work, where he nearly hit him with a vehicle. Documents say Humphreys told police he confronted the man, but the man denied calling the man a slur.
Relief may finally be on the horizon from pandemic-weary Washingtonians as the first doses of a COVID-19 vaccine are due to arrive this week. Governor Jay Inslee said Sunday the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine had passed independent scientific muster and could be administered as early as Tuesday to healthcare workers and other priority recipients. And as of Friday, Seattle's testing sites have completed more than 463,000 tests since June, with about 1 in 4 Seattle residents visiting the sites at least once, according to data requested from the city by the Seattle Times.
A new report reveals Washington State's foster children are spending more nights in hotel rooms instead of licensed care homes. The increase comes despite a King 5 investigation in February in which the Secretary of the Washington State Department of Children, Youth, and Families, or DCYF, pledged to curb the practice. In his 2020 year-end report, DCYF Ombuds Patrick Dowd said children in the foster care program spent a combined total of 1,863 nights in hospital rooms under the watch of social workers or security guards. That's a 23% increase compared to last year, which also saw a 40% increase compared to the year before. Dowd said DCYF has not cleared enough therapeutic homes or facilities to house these children who need significant structure and treatment.
Governor Jay Inslee today unveiled a slate of proposals intended to boost diversity and equity, which includes a proposed independent office for investigating deadly force by law enforcement, funding the state's new equity office, and establishing Juneteenth as a legal holiday. The plan, amongst other things, would also spend $10 million to maintain the state's COVID-19 relief fund for undocumented immigrants who have suffered during the pandemic, the Seattle Times reports. Inslee announced he was also joining State Insurance Commissioner Mike Creedler to request a bill banning insurance companies from using credit scores for homeowner, renter, auto, and boat insurance. With the legislature convening in January, lawmakers are tasked with writing new state spending blueprints as Washington continues to be battered by the COVID-19 pandemic and restrictions imposed to prevent the spread of the virus. This is the news on RainierAvenueRadio.world. When we return with national news, we'll talk about a newly discovered cyber spying campaign riddling federal agencies and more. Stay tuned.
Welcome back to RainierAvenueRadio.world. This is the national news. Immigration activists are gearing up for a fight to push President-elect Joe Biden to do more to counter the measures taken by President Trump that made life more uncomfortable for the 11 million undocumented immigrants living in the United States. Per NPR, Biden pledged during his campaign to use those powers to reverse many of Trump's most controversial actions. Biden's plan includes a 100-day moratorium on deportations, restoring protections for young immigrants brought to the country illegally as children, and eliminating Trump's restrictions on asylum seekers. However, the political divide in Congress makes a major overhaul of the immigration system unlikely. Although Biden promised to reverse Trump's most restrictive immigration policies, he didn't include immigration among his top 4 priorities: the coronavirus pandemic, economic recovery, racial equity, and climate change.
Hundreds of people lined up in the cold rain to cast ballots in a pair of U.S. Senate races in Georgia that will determine control of the chamber and heavily influence Democratic President-elect Joe Biden's ability to enact his agenda. Per Reuters, turnout on the first day of early voting in a contest that ends on January 5th could offer clues to which side ultimately prevails: Republican Senators David Perdue and Kelly Loeffler, or their respective Democratic challengers, John Ossoff and Reverend Raphael Warnock. Each side has made the race about Senate control and the success of Biden's priorities, with Republicans warning voters that President Trump's policies are on the line, and Democrats warning that healthcare coverage and coronavirus relief hang in the balance. For this election, the deadline to request a mail-in ballot is January 1st, and that is also the last day to vote early in person. The ballot must be received by January 5th, aka Election Day.
The Wisconsin Supreme Court rejected President Trump's lawsuit attempting to overturn his loss to Democrat Joe Biden in the battleground state. Per NPR AP News, this ends Trump's legal challenges in state court about an hour before the Electoral College was to meet to cast the state's 10 votes for Biden. In the 4-3 ruling, the court said 3 of Trump's 4 claims were filled too late and the other was without merit. The president sought to have more than 221,000 ballots disqualified in Dane and Milwaukee counties, the state's 2 most heavily Democratic counties. Those were the only 2 counties where Trump sought a recount, even though he lost statewide by just short of 21,000 votes, a margin of about 0.6%. Conservative Justice Brian Hagedorn, who was a swing vote, said the Trump campaign was, quote, not entitled to the relief it seeks.
For Hanukkah, the Jewish festival of lights this year, cantors from around the country have stepped in to bring music and spirit to the Jewish community. Per NPR, on Sunday evening, about a dozen Wisconsin cantors will virtually broadcast a mix of Hanukkah tunes, both traditional and reimagined. Some performances will be live and some pre-recorded. A professional sound engineer mixed together 2 tunes of the whole group singing separately and then pieced them together. There will be some favorites and also some lesser-known melodies which are sung in Yiddish.
U.S. government agencies were ordered to scour their networks for malware and disconnect potentially compromised servers on Monday after authorities learned that the Treasury and Commerce Departments were hacked in a global cyber espionage campaign tied to a foreign government. In a rare emergency directive issued last Sunday, the Department of Homeland Security warned of a quote-unquote unacceptable risk to the executive branch from a feared large-scale penetration of U.S. government agencies, which could date back to mid-year or earlier. Quote, this can turn into one of the most impactful espionage campaigns on record, said cybersecurity expert Dmitry Alperovich. Per the Associated Press, the campaign was first discovered when a prominent security firm, FireEye, learned it had been breached. They would not say who it suspected and noted that foreign governments and major corporations were also compromised.
The U.S. Congress will try this week to end months of indecision and infighting over the federal government's budget priorities with coronavirus aid, with more than $2 trillion in funding from D.C. potentially at stake. Lawmakers facing a midnight Friday deadline will scurry to put the finishing touches on a $1.4 trillion spending bill for the fiscal year that began on October 1st. At stake are funds for federally run programs ranging from healthcare, homeland security, and military readiness to foreign aid, national parks, and nutrition programs, Reuters reports. Members of the Republican-run Senate and Democratic-led House of Representatives, who fear negotiations could extend through the Christmas holiday, have a second major task: deciding the contours of a coronavirus aid bill that could approach $1 trillion amid a worsening pandemic that has claimed the lives of nearly 300,000 Americans.
The Trump administration announced on Monday new sanctions on 2 Iranians, blaming them for their quote-unquote direct involvement in the 2007 abduction and probable death of retired FBI agent Robert Levinson, Al Jazeera reports. The sanctions on 2 intelligence officers from the Iranian Ministry of Intelligence, quote, are the first public actions against the Iranian government to hold them accountable for the abduction of Mr. Levinson, the longest ever held U.S. hostage. Levinson appeared on March 9, 2007, where he was set to meet a source on Iran's Kish Island. In March of this year, the U.S. government concluded that he, quote-unquote, may have passed while in Iran's custody, and his family announced his death back in March. This is the news on Rainier Avenue Radio.world. When we come back with global news, you'll hear about Colombian coffee and more. Stay tuned.
Welcome back to Rainier Avenue Radio.world. This is the global news. Politicians in Argentina have voted yes to a bill that brings the largely Catholic country one step closer to legalizing abortion, a change long sought by women's rights activists. Per BBC News, before becoming law, the bill must also pass the upper house, which is the Senate. The vote is expected before the end of the year. Many women in Argentina who have an abortion can face prosecution. This bill would permit abortions to be carried out up to the 14th week of pregnancy. Currently, abortion is only permitted in cases of rape or if the mother's health is at risk from pregnancy. Latin America has some of the most restrictive abortion laws in the entire world, and the vote in Argentina will be closely watched by both sides of the polarized issue in the region.
Coffee pickers have become harder to hire amid the coronavirus pandemic. Low prices for beans means there's not much money to lure more workers by offering higher wages. Per BBC News, Santa Isabel, which has 900,000 coffee bushes, is one of many farms in the Colombian province of Antioquia that is struggling with labor shortages this year. The province needs about 32,000 coffee pickers from other parts of the country each year to collect its harvest, which takes place between September and December. Colombia's National Federation of Coffee Growers says it currently has a deficit of 7,000 pickers. To prevent outbreaks and make the job safer for pickers, farms in Colombia have taken biosecurity measures that include adding hand washing stations and temperature checks. Some of the larger farms have also expanded their dormitories or added tents so that their workers are more spaced out, with their bunk beds now placed 2 meters apart.
With a hard end-of-year deadline looming, the UK and the European Union will continue negotiations to try to avoid a no-deal Brexit. Per NPR, the UK left the European Union at the end of January, and negotiators have been working since then to hammer out the details once the UK is officially on its own. However, the official transition period is set to expire at the end of the month. Without an agreement, the two sides could face a host of problems. New tariffs could hurt businesses and increases prices for consumers. All goods moving between the UK and the EU will eventually be subject to customs, leading to delays and uncertainty. UK citizens wishing to travel throughout the EU and vice versa will also face new restrictions.
Moroccan authorities prevented a protest in the capital Rabat against the kingdom's move to normalize ties with Israel following a deal brokered by President Trump. Per Reuters, a heavy police presence backed by water cannons and anti-riot forces deployed in the main avenue leading to Parliament Square, where a group of pro-Palestinian rights organizations had planned the sit-in. There are nearly 1 million Jews hailing from Morocco in Israel, and last year, 70,000 visited the kingdom, which recognizes the Jewish community as a constituent of its national identity. A core element of the deal was the U.S. recognition of Moroccan sovereignty over the Western Sahara. A decades-old dispute over the territory has pitted Morocco against the Algeria-backed Polisario Front, which seeks to establish an independent state.
Tens of thousands of protesting Indian farmers called for a national farmers' strike today, the second in a week, to press for the quashing of 3 new laws on agricultural reform that they say will drive down crop prices and devastate their earnings. They are camping along at least 5 major highways bordering New Delhi and have said that they won't leave until the government rolls back what they call a quote-unquote black law. They have blockaded highways leading to the capital for 3 weeks, and several rounds of talks with the government have failed to produce any breakthroughs. Scores of farmer leaders also conducted a token hunger strike today at the protest sites, the AP reports. Protest leaders have rejected the government's offer to amend some contentious provisions, sticking to their demand for a total repeal.
Venezuela's quote-unquote law against hate is suddenly a key tool for Nicolas Maduro to repress dissent, particularly online. A Reuters review of over 40 recent arrests found that in each case, authorities used the law to detain critics of the president, his aides, or allies. Despite its growing use by prosecutors, the hate law is considered unconstitutional and illegitimate by many Venezuelan legal scholars. Not only does the law violate the right to free expression, they argue, it was also illegally enacted, drafted and rubber-stamped by a parallel legislator that Maduro created at the time to circumvent the opposition-controlled assembly. The law played an important role in nationwide elections this month, Maduro's opponents say, by cowing critics who had spoken out about the government in the run-up to the vote.
Nigerian authorities are stepping up efforts to rescue more than 300 students abducted by armed men who raided their hostels. Gunmen on motorcycles stormed the government science school in Kankara late on Friday and engaged security forces in a fierce gun battle, forcing hundreds of students to flee and hide in surrounding bushes and forest. State Governor Aminu Bello Masari, who visited the school on Saturday, said soldiers were working to locate and free the hostages. Since the attack, all secondary schools in the state have been shut, Al Jazeera reports. The Nigerian presidency has refuted claims by Katsina Governor Bello Masari that more than 300 children are still held in captivity by bandits. The presidency said only 10 boys were still missing, according to reports monitored by a local newspaper, The Punch. This is the news on RainierAvenueRadio.world. When we come back with sports news, we'll talk about the Cleveland baseball team and more. Stay tuned.
Welcome back to RainierAvenueRadio.world. This is the sports news. Jamal Adams made NFL history against the New York Jets yesterday, the same team that traded him to the Seattle Seahawks. Per ESPN, the All-Pro strong safety got a game ball after setting the single-season record for sacks by a defensive back with 8.5, one of several bright moments for the Seattle Seahawks on Sunday as they hammered the New York Jets 40-3 at Lumen Field for their second-largest margin of victory in 11 seasons under Carroll. That kept the Jets, now 0-13, winless, and got the Seahawks, now 9-4, back on track following their upset loss last week to the New York Giants. Adam called the gesture, quote-unquote, pretty cool, and a sign of how much the organization supports him. You can hear a more thorough breakdown of the game tonight on Monday Night Sports.
The Columbus Crew rattled the Sounders early and walked away with a 3-0 win at Mamfree Stadium. It was the home side's third straight postseason shutout. Sounders head coach Brian Schmetzer put it bluntly after the match, saying, quote unquote, this game was a failure. Per the Seattle Times, Columbus, known for its defense, was on the attack from the start. The Crew pressed the Sounders early to build a 2-0 lead at halftime and continued until the Cup was won, the club's first since 2008. The Sounders' defense was disheveled, to put it lightly. Columbus provided a historic setting for the championship played amid the coronavirus pandemic. A socially distanced crowd of more than 1,500 attended the match, marking the third MLS Cup played in the stadium. Porter won 2, leading the Portland Timbers to the 2015 title against Columbus. The Sounders, who won the 2019 title before a Washington State record 69,274 fans at the then CenturyLink Field, failed to become just the fourth team to repeat the MLS Cup champs. The last team to repeat was the Los Angeles Galaxy in 2011-2012.
23XI Racing announced a full slate of sponsorship to back the new NASCAR team owned by Michael Jordan and Denny Hamlin. Per ESPN, DoorDash, McDonald's, Columbia Sportswear, Dr. Pepper, and Root Insurance were all named quote-unquote founding partners for the number 23 Toyota Camry that Bubba Wallace will drive next season. All but Dr. Pepper had existing relationships with Wallace, and many signed since this summer, when he took a national role in social justice issues. Wallace is the only black full-time driver at NASCAR's top level. In June, he successfully called for the series to ban the display of Confederate flags at racetracks. His activism drew a significant amount of personal services agreements with companies, funding that gave him a treasure chest estimated at least $18 million in sponsorship for his racing endeavors.
Stanford remained atop the Associated Press women's basketball poll released today and picked up first-place votes, too. Per ESPN, Coach Tara Van Dever matched Pat Summitt's all-time win total of 1,098 with a victory on Sunday night over California that kept Stanford unbeaten. She can move into sole possession of the record on Tuesday when her team faces Pacific. Louisville, UConn, NC State, and South Carolina followed Stanford as the first five remained unchanged in their position. The Huskies finally got their season started after being on pause for 2 weeks because of the coronavirus. Arizona remained in sixth place, with Oregon moving into a tie with Baylor for seventh. The Ducks routed rival Oregon State, which lost both its games this past week to fall 6 spots to number 21. Kentucky was ninth, and Texas A&M was 10th.
Speaking of that Huskies game, 6 Huskies scored in double figures, and the team set a new arena record for field goal percentage as Washington trounced Portland 83-56 at Alaska Airlines Arena on Sunday. Ball movement played a big part in the Huskies' great shooting night, Coach Judy Wynn said after a team's second win of the season over a team in the upper echelon of the WCC. Quote, I thought we had open looks and we didn't settle for contested jump shots. We didn't settle for anything that was off balance the entire day, and that was the difference, she said. Quay Miller led the Huskies with a career-high 21 points and had a team-best 9 rebounds, the Seattle Times reports.
Following years of protests from fans and Native American groups, the Cleveland Indians have decided to change their team name, moving away from a moniker that has long been criticized as racist, 3 people familiar with the decision said on Sunday. The move follows a decision by the Washington football team of the NFL in July to stop using a name long considered a racial slur, and is part of a larger national conversation about race that magnified this year amid protests of systemic racism and police violence. It is not immediately clear what Cleveland's exact steps will be beyond dropping its name, the New York Times reports. The transition to a new name involves many logistical considerations, including work with uniform manufacturers and companies that produce other team equipment and stadium signage.
The Pac-12 Conference has set the schedule for its final week of football games, the AP reports. The conference announced Sunday its teams will play 6 games, including Washington at number 16, California, in the Pac-12 championship game on Friday, which has actually just been canceled because Washington doesn't have enough players to play. Oregon will face number 21 Colorado at Memorial Coliseum in Southern California on Saturday. The winner of that game could slide into a rescheduled title game if the Trojans or Huskies are unable to play due to COVID-19 issues. Saturday's games also include Washington State at Utah, Stanford at UCLA, and Arizona State at Oregon State. Arizona will face California at a site and a time to be determined.
Now it's time to go over tonight's show plugs. The Sentiment with Latrice Donahue is live at 6 p.m. on Wednesday, right before our show, and afterwards we'll be playing the special 100th episode of Heartbeat Radio with Cindy Bright.
And we are excited to announce that Rainier Avenue Radio, in conjunction with Seattle Public School Athletics and Seattle High Schools, will be recognizing student athletes who have received athletic scholarships to NCAA Division I and Division II institutions. Students will be signing their letters of intent live on the air. College coaches will participate virtually. The first show will be this Wednesday from 4:30 to 5 p.m. It is a great honor for our inaugural show to recognize Franco Gradden, who will be signing with Fresno State to play football in the fall. He will be a graduate of Rainier Beach High School class of 2020. During these times, this is a way to do something special for our senior student athletes who are missing out on so much.
This has been the news on RainierAvenueRadio.world. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you Wednesday.
Here with the Rainier Avenue Radio traffic.